To the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is pivotal moments. There are moments in our lives where something happens and our lives are changed. And not sometimes for the better, sometimes not, very much depending on how we integrate those moments. But let's discuss and let's look at how we might be able to create these pivotal moments to further our greatest fulfillment and expression. Good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. So good to have you here with us this morning. And welcome to everybody else who's joining us. Before we get started, let's take a minute to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together. Vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop, and allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables us to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So pivotal moments where something happens that is life-changing. And it's not just that the happening itself is life-changing, but what we do with that happening. So I'm just going to give an example. And these life changes can be occurring on all different degrees. I'll give two examples. So at one point, I was smoking cigarettes, and I hadn't, not for that long, but I was smoking cigarettes, and I heard on the radio and a public service announcement kind of ad, which was Yul Brynner, the actor Yul Brynner, who had died of cancer from smoking. And he was saying, if you're hearing this, I've died of cancer. You know, this is, take it seriously. And if you smoke, stop smoking. And for whatever reason, I allowed that moment to be one of those pivotal moments. So I guess the question is, what was it in that moment that allowed me to receive that message and make it real for myself and use it as a pivotal moment to change my behavior? And I quit smoking. And so that it was a life-altering moment for that time. And what I'm very curious for myself, looking at that dynamic, as to what it was exactly that allowed me to let that moment sink in, to let that be a pivotal moment. But it was, and I was able to use it that way for myself, to my betterment, the betterment of my health. And this is getting to the point, which is that we can actually manufacture these moments too. They don't have to be circumstances that are put upon us. Here, yes, I had a circumstance. However, I chose to engage myself with the opportunity of that circumstance. And inviting that change, receiving that change, allowing that change, aligning with it, has tremendous power. And we can create these circumstances. So another situation where a circumstance was created to be able to make a change. So before COVID, I attended a training, a coaching, it was sort of a promotion for a coaching program. And it was essentially a transformational weekend. And one of the exercises we did was called the Dickens process. And actually there were two exercises that co-joined, but the Dickens process was a la the Christmas Carol. We got an opportunity to connect to what was happening in our lives, and if we projected forward, what our lives would look like on that trajectory a year from now, 5 years from now, 20 years from now, at the time of our death, looking back and saying, oh, I, having not made the changes, having not pursued the dreams. And it was a room filled with something like 600 people wailing and crying, and because we were encouraged to really get into the emotion of those lost dreams. And at the end of that, feeling that devastation and despair of dreams unfulfilled, we then were brought back to this present moment as a choice point, and essentially drew a line in the sand. There wasn't sand, but we drew an imaginary line and got to choose whether we were going to step into the new life that we wanted to create, whether we wanted to step into the dreams, to owning the dreams and the potentials that we believed ourselves to have. And so here was all this emotion, the deep experience, the deep negative experience of not making a certain choice, really connecting to that on a deep emotional level. And then the opportunity to actually step into our vision and our dreams for ourselves. And we created this line and had the opportunity to step across that line. And I can tell you, I've done a bunch of different things that are adrenaline producing, but I can tell you that stepping over that line into the future that I was calling forth for myself was one of the most frightening things I've ever done. Stepping into an unknown, of myself and who I would allow myself to be. And so I stepped over that line. And my life has been forever changed as a result, because it spurred me into action. Now, what is it that made that such an impactful exercise? So much so that I couldn't go back. I didn't want to go back, but I couldn't really go back. And so what the dynamic was in this manufactured pivotal moment, was deep, deep, deep emotion related to the cost of continuing along the path that I was going. And I think the same thing was at play in the Yul Brynner example around smoking. For whatever reason, in that moment, I allowed myself to be emotionally vulnerable enough to connect emotionally with the cost of continuing along the path that I was going. And also in this other exercise, we had spent time cultivating our dream and vision as well. And so what happened in that dynamic was that there was a deep, deep experience of pain to be able to want to move away from that pain. And there was also the deep emotional experience that had been created of what I wanted to move toward. And so the line was between those two things. And we have the ability to set this up for ourselves in our lives. The thing is that most often we numb ourselves to our experience. So, for example, with our negative experiences or just the way that life is, we kind of become unconscious to it. We numb ourselves to it, and we don't presence ourselves to the fact that this moment, any moment, can be one of those pivotal points, those pivotal moments, that any moment can be a moment that we embrace a new direction. So I remember a story of someone who was not happy with their lives, not happy with how they were showing up in their lives. And they went away to school. And the thing is that nobody knew them. They realized nobody knows me there. There's no history. There's no story. I can be anybody I want to be. I'm not bound by the constraints of people's of shared histories. And I can show up in any way I like. And they did. And they turned around their own self-image. So what we might be talking about here is the willingness to let go of our limited notions of who we are, to step outside of what I've heard called the thrall, like the hypnosis, to step outside of the day-to-day, one foot in front of the other, chugging through, just doing whatever, the routine demands, to step outside and give ourselves an opportunity to assess and to really look, what's working in my life, what's not working in my life, what's the consequence of continuing on in the way that I'm going, what does that look like? What does that cost me? Or if I'm going in a great direction, what's that bringing me? But what we're talking about here is, how do we incite ourselves to change or to greater fulfillment, to an expansion of our capacity? And it takes looking. It takes looking. And it also takes being willing to face challenges, you know, to push the limits of our comfort zone, to be able to give ourselves permission to step outside the ideas of who we are, so that we can become something even more of who we are. That's kind of the irony about it, is we have all these ideas of who we are, and very often they're extremely limiting ideas. And when we can break out of that, what's happening is that we're coming into our fuller expression, our more authentic expression, because we're not binding ourselves. It was really interesting. 2 sessions that I did yesterday, people were talking about being bound and constricted and kind of locked up. And what they experienced as a result of the session was a newfound freedom. And one of those people, particularly, we were talking about being outside the box, you know, that this person had always sort of pushed the walls of the box, but never knocked them down. And then through their visualization, then the box just disappeared. There was no more box. It wasn't about, you know, going to the walls, pushing the limits. There were no limits anymore. And so when we allow ourselves to entertain that there may be no limits, that the box was something that we created, actually, then we get to make choices. And that can be really intimidating, to make the choices about, what do I really want? I remember years ago talking to a friend and saying, well, let's talk about dreams. And they were like, no, we're not doing that, because they had a plan. And this plan was what they were going to follow. And that was that. And we don't want to rock the boat. It still shocks me as I think back on that, is like, why would we not entertain our dreams? You know, what is it that allows us to shackle ourselves so thoroughly, you know, that, and yesterday we were talking about adulting. So in our growing up environments, oftentimes we are shackled, we are constrained. You know, we're told who we are, how we should be. We may be disciplined, we may be silenced, we may be made to feel invisible. There are all kinds of things that happen in family dynamics that we then get to spend the rest of our lives overcoming. But at some point, the fact is that we were taught how to shackle ourselves by others that shackled us, right? So we were shackled, and then we accepted the shackles. It's like the story about how do you train fleas. You know, you put the fleas in a jar, you put a lid on the jar, they jump, they bang their heads on the lid, and so they stop jumping quite so high. And then you can take the lid off the jar, and the fleas stay in the jar because they know that that's where the lid is. And we're not that much different. That we become entrained, and we don't even realize that then we are the ones that are creating our own limits. One of the best sayings that I've heard from my clients is from this one client who would talk about their favorite miserable. And we get very attached to our favorite miserable. It's kind of the old familiar place to go when life confronts us. It's like it may be anger, it may be depression, it may be it may be blame or resentment or any number of other places, but it's a familiar place. And as uncomfortable as it has a familiarity and a comfort about it that has us returning to it because of that familiarity, even though it is in direct opposition to what we believe we desire. It's kind of like the devil you know is better than the devil you don't, or whatever it is that you don't. The devil you know is better than not knowing. And so the familiarity of routine can be something that really sucks the life out of us, that makes it so that we cannot grow into our potential, that we cannot become or express our greatest capacities. So we end up living lives of quiet desperation. And part of that is because we haven't allowed ourselves, perhaps, the risk of dreaming and really looking at what do we choose our lives to be. We often make the choice of what our lives are by default, just by going with the flow, going with the tide, going with the crowd, going with the expectations that are placed upon us. I think this is why so many people end up with kind of a midlife crisis, because you've done all the things that you were supposed to do and maybe achieved what you were supposed to achieve, and yet still there's this sense of emptiness, this lack of fulfillment, like you're stuck in somebody else's life. And then what? But what if we start asking ourselves earlier, what is it that we want? What if we create a pivotal moment in our lives that opens up new vistas of possibility for us, that takes us in the direction of the extraordinary and the outrageous, and just play full out? What would it be like if we played in life like we could make it up pretty much any way we want it to be? What would that be? If we could really go for what mattered to us, what would that feel like? What would that be? What kind of vitality might you feel, even if you fall on your face? Just going for what matters. You can make that choice now. You can make that choice in any given moment. And why wait? You know, it's really interesting. I have had, I guess I've been confronted with the question myself also, is do the practical thing, and then eventually, once you get that handled, then you get to go follow your dream. And I can tell you from my experience, I had two things. I wanted to start sustainability now, and I wanted to develop a coaching practice. And I wanted, everybody was counseling me to start the coaching practice first, and then once I got stable, I could then start sustainability now. And it hurt my heart every time I thought about that, so I didn't do that. I started Sustainability Now, which is it's a podcast. You can check it out, sustainabilitynow.global. It's given me entree into a whole world that I have dreamt of. And then once that was established, then I started the coaching practice. And I can tell you that had I started the coaching practice first, I never would have gotten around to starting Sustainability Now. And that was my big dream. It was to get rolling on that, or it's actually part of a bigger dream. But if I hadn't started it, never would have happened. And so I encourage you to feed your dream. Make this a moment, make this a pivotal moment where you choose, where you step over that line into your vision for your life, that you take your life in hand, and you don't have to know how. When you have a commitment, the universe conspires to support you in it. You don't have to know how. But when you step over that line, something in your heart changes. And it gives your life a whole different dimension of meaning and being and motivation and richness and fulfillment, even if it's hard, because you now have a will for something that you're really in alignment with, that's in alignment with your fullest expression. So seize the moment. That's today's message. And may it take you into a wonderful weekend. Thank you, Ruslan. You too have a wonderful weekend. So much love to you, and to all of you who are joining us. Thank you. It's always a privilege to be with you and to have these morning musings. So please like and follow Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And me, the links are in the description. And until next time, so much love to you.